My name is Alara Collins, and I'm 31 years old. 3 weeks ago, my father passed away, leaving a silence in our house so heavy it felt like the air itself refused to move. He wasn't just my father, he was the quiet anchor of our family, the one who kept everything steady when storms came. Now that he was gone, every corner of our home whispered his absence. His favorite chair in the living room sat untouched, and even the faint smell of his cologne lingered, wrapping itself around me like an unfinished goodbye. I thought grief would come as tears and long nights, but it came as confusion, a hollow ache filled with questions no one seemed willing to answer. The day after the funeral, I found myself in his study, surrounded by stacks of old books, faded ledgers, and dust that caught the sunlight like a memory suspended in the air. My mother wanted to sell the house quickly, but I wasn't ready to let go, not before I understood the parts of my father's life that didn't quite make sense. He'd always been careful, meticulous, but in the months before his death, I noticed he'd grown distant, secretive even. I told myself it was age, or stress from the family business, but deep down, I knew something was different. As I went through his things, I came across his reading glasses resting on an open notebook. The last line written in his familiar handwriting stopped me cold. The truth will protect her, even when I can't. I traced the ink with my fingers, my heart tightening. Protect who? Me? My mother? And from what? The words felt like a door half open, leading somewhere I wasn't sure I wanted to go. Sorting through the drawers brought back flashes of my childhood, the way he used to read me stories on rainy nights, how he'd make pancakes in the shape of stars every Sunday. I could almost hear his laugh again, that soft rumble that made everything feel safe. But then, like a bitter contrast, came the memory of my mother arguing with him late, one evening, her voice sharp and angry, his calm and tired. I'd never known what the fight was about, and neither of them ever spoke of it again. Grief has a way of unearthing what's been buried. The more I sorted, the more unsettled I became. It wasn't just sorrow, I felt it was curiosity, tinged with unease. Behind the rows of files in his cabinet, something metallic caught my eye. I pulled out a small wooden box, its edges worn smooth with age. It was locked. There was no label, no key. Just that quiet resistance when I tried to open it. For a moment, I simply held it, feeling the weight of it in my hands. It wasn't just heavy with wood and brass, it was heavy with something else. Secrets, maybe. My mother called out from downstairs, her tone brisk, irritated that I was still rummaging through his things. Our relationship had never been easy, but since his death, the distance between us had widened into something almost unbearable. She wanted everything packed, gone, forgotten. I couldn't do that, not yet. When she saw the box in my hands, her expression changed, only for a moment, but I caught it. A flicker of recognition, quickly buried under indifference. "What's that?" she asked. "Just something of Dad's," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Leave it." That single sentence carried too much meaning to ignore. That night, after she went to bed, I sat alone in the study, the box in front of me under the yellow glow of a desk lamp. I turned it over, examining every edge, every small detail, when my fingers brushed against the back of an old photo frame. It was a picture of our family taken years ago. At the lake house, my parents smiling. My younger self in the middle, clutching my father's arm. Something about the frame felt uneven. I lifted it, turned it over, and there, taped behind it, was a small, rusted key. My pulse quickened as I held it up to the light. It was old, but it looked like it might fit. A strange chill moved through me as I realized what this meant. My father had hidden this key for a reason. Tomorrow, I decided, I would open that box. Whatever he had wanted to protect me from, I was ready to face it. The next morning, I woke up with that small, rusted key lying on my nightstand, its edges cold against the wood. The memory of finding it haunted me all night. I couldn't stop wondering what my father had hidden so carefully, what secret he thought I needed to find after he was gone. The air felt heavier that morning, the kind of stillness that made me feel like something important was about to shift. I went down to the study, the wooden box waiting exactly where I had left it. My hands trembled as I inserted the key, the tiny lock clicking open with a sound that felt almost too loud in the quiet room. Inside, I found a single envelope, yellowed around the edges but intact. My name, Alara, was written across it in my father's neat, steady handwriting. The sight of it made my chest tighten. I ran my fingers over the letters as if touching his handwriting could somehow bring him back. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at it. Opening it felt like crossing into something irreversible. Once I read it, I couldn't unread it. Whatever it held would become part of me forever. Finally, I tore the seal open. The faint scent of old paper filled the air. His words began gently, the way he always spoke to me. He told me how proud he was of the woman I had become, how he wished he could have seen more of my life unfold. But as I kept reading, the tone shifted. The lines became heavier, the ink darker, as if he'd written them in haste, burdened by something unbearable. He wrote, "There are things you never knew, truths I kept from you to protect you. Someone close to us, someone we trusted, destroyed everything I built. They turned mother against me, poisoned hearts with lies, and left our family fractured beyond repair." I froze, my eyes moving over the words again, trying to make sense of them. My father wasn't dramatic, he didn't speak in riddles. If he wrote this, it meant something real, something dangerous. I could almost hear his voice in my head, calm but pained, as if he'd carried this weight alone for too long. The letter went on, describing betrayal in vague but chilling terms, how his reputation had been ruined, how their family's business had crumbled, how trust had been twisted into a weapon. He said there was evidence of what happened, but he couldn't risk exposing it while he was alive. "The truth is buried where our happiest memories once lived," he wrote. "At the lake house, under the shadow of what was taken from us." I read that line again and again. The lake house. It had been years since I'd been there. It was where my family spent every summer when I was a child. The smell of pine trees. The sound of water lapping against the dock. My father, teaching me how to skip stones. But something had changed near the end. One summer, everything stopped. No more visits, no explanations. My parents stopped mentioning it entirely. I was too young then to understand why. Now, as I sat holding that letter, the meaning behind those summers began to shift. What had been innocent nostalgia was now colored with suspicion. What exactly was buried there? And why did my father sound so certain that the truth was dangerous? He mentioned no names, just a warning. "Not everyone deserves your trust, Alara. Be careful who you believe. Some smiles hide the sharpest knives." I leaned back in the chair, my pulse pounding in my ears. My thoughts swirled between grief, fear, and anger. Someone had betrayed him, betrayed us, and my mother might have known all along. I wanted to confront her immediately, but something inside told me to wait. If my father wanted me to find the truth at the lake house, then that was where I had to go. My eyes dropped. To the last line, written in hurried strokes, the ink slightly smudged as if his hand had shaken when he wrote it. It read, "Find the truth before they find you." The words sent a chill through me that no sunlight could warm. The road to the lake house hadn't changed much in 10 years, still lined with tall pines that bent slightly toward the water, still winding and narrow enough to make me slow down at every turn. As the car crept along the familiar path, waves of memory crashed against me. I could almost hear the echo of my own laughter from childhood summers, my father's voice calling me from the dock, the smell of grilled corn and wood smoke drifting through the air. But when I pulled up to the gate, the silence that greeted me was thick and absolute. The once vibrant house that had been our family's escape now stood tired and forgotten, its white paint chipped and the front steps sagging under time's weight. I stepped out of the car, gravel crunching beneath my shoes. The lake spread out before me, still and glassy, reflecting the gray sky above. A chill crept through me, not from the air, but from the sense that I was trespassing in a place heavy with ghosts. Unlocking the front door felt like disturbing a memory that wanted to stay buried. The hinges groaned as I pushed it open, and a faint smell of dust and cedar hit me. Inside, everything was exactly as we'd left it, just older, quieter, and lonelier. The living room still had the old stone fireplace, with faded photographs on the mantel. I picked one up, my parents smiling beside each other, my father's arm around her waist, my younger self between them, missing one front tooth. The frame was cracked, and someone had torn the corner where another person should have been. I frowned. The next frame was worse. A family photo with a clean slice through the middle, removing someone entirely. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. Someone had erased pieces of our past. As I moved through the house, the echoes of those missing pieces grew louder. My mind kept circling back to my father's words. The truth is buried where our happiest memories once lived. What truth could have been hidden in this place that once held only warmth? Outside, the sound of footsteps on gravel startled me. I turned to see an older woman walking toward me from the neighboring cottage. Her face was vaguely familiar. "Alara Collins?" she asked, squinting through the afternoon light. "You're Thomas's daughter, aren't you?" "Yes," I said, unsure of her tone. She nodded slowly. "I'm Mrs. Porter. I used to watch you run around here with your little floaties on. You were always laughing." Her expression softened, then turned guarded. "Didn't think anyone would come back here after that summer." My pulse quickened. "That summer?" She hesitated. "The one when everything changed. Your parents, there was some awful argument that night, I remember. Because the storm hit right after. Terrible thunder, power went out for hours. When it passed, your father left before sunrise. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight." I stared at her, trying to recall that night. There was a vague image in my mind, rain pelting the windows, my mother shouting, me hiding under a blanket, but it was blurry, half dream. My father never mentioned it again. "Do you know what they were fighting about?" I asked quietly. Mrs. Porter shook her head. "No. But whatever it was broke him. He came by the next morning to say goodbye. Said he couldn't stay here anymore." She gave me a sad smile and walked away, leaving her words floating like mist. Inside, I searched through the house again, this time with a sharper focus. I found my father's old photo albums stacked in a cabinet. Most pages were filled with smiling faces, summer picnics, and sunlit afternoons. But near the end of one album, tucked behind a torn photograph, I found a folded piece of paper. My breath caught as I unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakably his. It read, "Ask her about the night of the storm." I stood frozen, the note trembling in my hands. Her, it could only mean my mother, the same woman who told me to leave the box alone, the same woman who had hidden something from me my whole life. The lake house was supposed to be a place of joy, but now it felt like a crime scene of emotions, betrayal, silence, and buried truth. As I walked out, the wind picked up, rustling the trees as if the place itself exhaled a secret. I locked the door behind me, the metal cold against my skin, and looked once more at the water glinting under the dying light. My father had left his truth here, but my mother held the rest. I got into my car and started the engine, the note clutched tightly in my hand. My mind was set. I was going home not to mourn, but to confront. When I arrived home that evening, the house felt different, quieter, as if it was holding its breath. My mother was in the kitchen, standing by the sink, her back to me, washing a glass that didn't need washing. She didn't turn when I entered. "You've been gone all day," she said evenly, her voice giving nothing away. "I went to the lake house," I said, watching her carefully. The glass slipped slightly in her hand before she steadied it. "That place should have been sold years ago. It's full of ghosts." "Maybe that's why I went," I said. "To ask them what really happened." She turned then, her expression unreadable, but her eyes, those familiar gray eyes, gave her away. There was fear there, quickly masked by irritation. "You shouldn't dig into the past, Alara. Some things are better left alone." "I found Dad's letter," I said quietly, "and the note he left at the lake house." For a moment, everything in the room froze. The clock ticked louder. The faucet dripped, but she didn't move. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled just enough for me to notice. "He left you that letter?" "Yes," I said, stepping closer. "He wrote about betrayal, about someone close to us who destroyed everything. He told me to find the truth. Her hands gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning white. Your father had many ideas near the end. He was confused. You shouldn't take everything he wrote as fact. I felt anger rising, sharp and steady. You think he made it up? The man who built everything we had, who loved us more than anything? He wasn't confused, he was warning me. She closed her eyes, as if the weight of my words physically struck her. You don't understand what he was trying to protect you from, she whispered. Then make me understand, I said. Tell me what happened that night. Tell me why the lake house feels like a wound no one talks about. For the first time, she looked smaller, her shoulders slumping under the weight of memories she'd tried too long to bury. That night, she began softly, there was a storm. We argued. He wanted to make something public, something that would have destroyed everything. Our business, our family, even you. What was it? I asked, my voice low. Her gaze shifted away. A betrayal, yes, but not in the way you think. There was another person involved, a woman. She wanted what we had. She envied us, our home, our life. Your father trusted her. And it cost us everything. My stomach tightened. Who was she? She shook her head quickly. It doesn't matter now. She's gone. It matters to me, I said, my voice breaking slightly. Because he died with this secret, and you've been hiding it from me. Her lips trembled before she spoke again. I did it to protect you, Ilara. You were too young. You wouldn't have understood the kind of lies that were told about him, about us. I stared at her, my mind spinning with fragments of memory and doubt. You think protecting me means keeping me blind? Tears filled her eyes, but her voice hardened. Some truths will destroy you if you dig too deep. Her words landed like stones in my chest. I wanted to scream, to demand everything she was refusing to say, but the look on her face stopped me. It wasn't defiance, it was fear. Fear of what I might find if I kept going. Dinner that night passed in silence. She barely ate, and I could barely sit still. My father's letter, her half-truths, the missing faces in those old photos, it all felt like a tangled web tightening around me. I knew now that my father wasn't the only one who'd kept secrets. My mother was guarding something too, and whatever it was, it terrified her. Later that night, unable to sleep, I sat in bed, scrolling through the messages on my phone, trying to distract myself. That's when the screen lit up with a new text from an unknown number. The message was short, chillingly precise. Your father wasn't who you think he was. My breath caught as I stared at it, my pulse thundering in my ears. Whoever sent that message knew something, maybe everything. And just like that, I realized the truth wasn't just buried in the past. It was coming for me now. Sleep was impossible after that text. I lay in the dark, the glow of my phone screen, the only light in the room, rereading the message over and over. Your father wasn't who you think he was. Each time I read it, it felt like a fresh wound opening. I wanted to delete it, to pretend it never came. But curiosity mixed with dread held me captive. Finally, I typed back before I could talk myself out of it. Who are you? The reply came almost instantly. Someone who knew your father better than anyone else. My name is Claire. My chest tightened. Claire. The name meant nothing to me, yet the certainty in her tone made my stomach twist. I think you deserve the truth about him, she added. About who he really was, and what he was hiding. I sat up, my mind spinning. What could she possibly know that I didn't? Before I could respond, another message arrived, a photo. I opened it, and my breath caught. It was my father, unmistakably younger, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. His arm was around her waist, his expression soft, intimate. The picture looked personal, almost tender. The woman's face was turned slightly. But even from the angle, I could tell she wasn't my mother. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, feeling the edges of my world tilt. My father, the man I'd spent my whole life admiring, mourning, had been with another woman? It didn't make sense. The man I knew wouldn't have done that. He was loyal, dependable, or at least, that's what I had always believed. I typed with shaking hands. Where did you get this? It doesn't matter where. What matters is why, Claire replied. He wasn't the man you think. Meet me tomorrow morning. It can explain everything. She sent an address, a small cafe downtown, one I vaguely remembered passing before. My first instinct was to say no. For all I knew, this was some cruel game, or worse, an attempt to manipulate me while I was vulnerable. But something about her tone, the calm certainty of it, kept echoing in my mind. If there was even a chance she knew something about my father's past, I needed to hear it. The rest of the night dragged. Doubt gnawed at me from every direction. I thought of my mother, her cryptic words, her fear of truths that could destroy. I thought of the lake house, the torn photos, my father's letter. Was this what he had meant? Had he been hiding not just betrayal but his own mistakes? The idea hurt more than I expected. By morning, exhaustion gave way to resolve. I needed answers. I dressed quietly, not wanting to wake my mother, and drove to the cafe. It was nearly empty, just the hum of soft music and the smell of coffee in the air. At a corner table sat a woman with short auburn hair and tired eyes that had once probably been striking. She looked up as I entered and gave a small, knowing smile. "Elara?" she asked. I nodded cautiously. "Claire?" She gestured for me to sit. "You look just like him," she said softly. And something about the way she said it made my stomach turn. "Why did you contact me?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. She took out her phone and placed it on the table, the same photo glowing on the screen. "Because you deserve to know the truth about Thomas Collins. He wasn't the villain people made him out to be. But he wasn't innocent either." My heart pounded. "You knew him?" She nodded. "For years, we worked together, and for a while, we were close." Her eyes flicked down, as if ashamed. "But it's not what you think. He was caught in something much bigger, something that destroyed him." Her words made my pulse quicken. "What do you mean? Was he caught in?" Claire hesitated, then reached into her bag. "You need to see this first," she said, sliding a small photograph across the table. It was another picture of my father. But this time, the woman beside him wasn't a stranger. It was my mother's best friend, Iris, the same woman who'd vanished from our lives years ago without a word. My throat went dry as I stared at their faces frozen in time, smiling like they had no idea what was coming. The moment I saw Iris's face in that photograph, a rush of memories came flooding back. Her laughter echoing through our living room. Her bright scarves, her easy warmth. Iris had been my mother's closest friend for years. She was at every family gathering, every birthday, every holiday. Then one day, she was simply gone. No explanation, no goodbye, just silence. When I asked my mother about her back then, she only said, "People drift apart, Elara." Subject. Now, looking at the photo of my father standing beside her, their smiles too comfortable, I understood there had been far more to the story than anyone had let on. I looked up at Claire, my pulse thudding in my ears. "How did you get this picture?" "She gave it to me," Claire said quietly, before she disappeared. "You knew Iris?" I asked, disbelief thick in my voice. Claire nodded. "We all worked together, your father, Iris, and me. It started as a business venture, something to do with private investments and property. But things got complicated." "Complicated how?" I pressed. She sighed, stirring her untouched coffee. "They trusted the wrong people. Your father put money into a project that went missing. Millions, maybe more. And when he found out who was responsible, everything fell apart." Her words made my stomach twist. "You're saying my father lost money?" "Not just money," she said. "Trust, reputation. He believed someone close to him betrayed him." I thought of the way my father's eyes used to darken when the subject of the business came up. How my mother would quickly change the conversation. Was Iris the one who betrayed him? Claire hesitated. "I don't know. but I do know that after the scandal, she vanished. And your mother cut her off completely. Maybe your father couldn't forgive her, or maybe he couldn't forgive himself. I stared at the photograph again. The closeness between my father and Iris in that image felt too intimate to ignore. Yet, something about the way Claire spoke made it sound like this wasn't about love. It was about something larger, something hidden under layers of secrecy and regret. After leaving the cafe, I couldn't shake the need to see where Iris had lived. I found her last known address through an old property record, an aging house on the outskirts of town. The drive there felt longer than it was, my thoughts tumbling through every possible explanation. When I arrived, the house looked forgotten by time. The paint was peeling, the windows covered in grime, and the mailbox was stuffed with old flyers and dust. Still, something about it called to me. The front door creaked open easily, as if the lock had given up years ago. The air inside was stale, carrying the scent of old paper and neglect. Furniture still sat where it must have been left in a hurry, coffee cups on the table, a coat draped over a chair, a photograph of Iris smiling beside my mother on a shelf. My chest tightened at the sight. They'd once looked inseparable. In a desk drawer, I found a pile of papers, receipts, ledgers, and handwritten notes. Many were dated around the same time my father's business had collapsed. Among them were several letters addressed to him. In Iris's delicate script. "Tom, I never meant for this to happen." One read. "They said the money would come back. I just wanted to fix things." My pulse quickened as I sifted through the pile, uncovering more fragments, bank slips, property deeds, and one particularly chilling document labeled Investment Fund Transfer, Missing Ledger. The pieces began to align in my mind. This wasn't an affair born of passion but of partnership, maybe desperation. My father must have discovered something that implicated Iris, and she, in turn, may have vanished to avoid the fallout. The more I read, the clearer it became that the betrayal my father wrote about might not have been personal, it might have been financial. I was about to leave when I noticed an old photo album on the bookshelf, its spine barely holding together. Inside, between fading photographs of my parents, Iris, and other familiar faces, something caught my eye. Tucked between two pages was a sealed envelope. My breath hitched as I saw my name written across it in Iris's handwriting. "For Ilara if I'm gone." The words blurred as I stared at them. The room felt colder suddenly. The shadows heavier. Whatever truth my father had been searching for, Iris might have left behind her own. My fingers hovered over the seal, but I couldn't bring myself to open it, not yet. I slipped the envelope into my bag, my heart pounding as I left the abandoned house. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of rain. I had the feeling that what waited inside that envelope could change everything I thought I knew about my family. I didn't open the envelope right away. It sat on my desk for 2 days, untouched, like something alive that I was afraid to disturb. Every time I passed by it, I felt its weight, not just the paper, but the secrets pressed inside. On the third evening, after another tense, silence-filled dinner with my mother, I finally locked myself in my room and sat down with trembling hands. The envelope's paper was yellowed, edges softened by time. My name, written in Iris's graceful cursive, looked fragile, as if the ink itself was fading away. When I slid the letter out, a faint scent of lavender drifted up her perfume. My heart clenched at the memory of her hugging me when I was little, whispering kind things my mother rarely said. I unfolded the pages, and her words spilled out like a confession she'd carried too long. "Ilara, if you are reading this, then I'm already gone or have been forced to disappear. I never meant to hurt your father or your family. I made mistakes, terrible ones, but not in the way people believed. I was manipulated, and by the time I understood it, it was too late." I paused, the words vibrating in my chest. Manipulated? By whom? The next lines were even heavier. "Your father trusted the wrong person. His partner, the one he believed was loyal, framed him. I thought I could fix it, but I only made things worse. When the money vanished, everyone thought it was me. I didn't take it. The funds were hidden to protect him, to keep others from seizing what he'd built." I read the sentence again. slowly. The money wasn't stolen. It was hidden. My father had been ruined by a lie, and someone had made sure it stayed that way. I turned to the second page, my heart beat loud in my ears. There was one name your father never wanted to say out loud, Mara. She orchestrated everything. She was clever, ruthless, and he trusted her more than anyone. I think he loved her in a way he never admitted. When he discovered what she'd done, she made sure he couldn't expose her. The name, Mara, hung in my mind like a ghost. I didn't recognize it, but it felt familiar in some unexplainable way. Like a shadow that had always been nearby. I read on. If anything happens to me, find her. Ask Mara about the ledger. It holds everything, the proof, the truth, and maybe even your father's redemption. I wish I had been braver. I wish I had told you sooner. But fear makes cowards of us all. The letter ended there, abruptly, as if she'd run out of time. My hands trembled as I set the papers down. My father's trusted partner. Someone who had betrayed him, framed him, destroyed his legacy, and possibly forced Iris into hiding. And now, Iris herself was gone, leaving behind a name that carried the weight of everything unanswered. I felt the puzzle tightening around me. The letter from my father, my mother's fear, Iris's confession, they all connected. But I still didn't know how. My father had written about betrayal, and Iris had confirmed it. But who exactly was Mara? I turned to my laptop, the glow of the screen cutting through the dimness of the room. I typed the name Mara alongside my father's company name, Collins Investments. Within seconds, results began to appear: old business articles, partnership announcements, and archived board documents. And there it was, in black and white. Mara Lindell, co-founder and financial director. The name sent a chill down my spine. She wasn't just some distant associate, she had been part of everything. Her name appeared in nearly every major business deal my father had ever made, right up until the year before his death. I clicked deeper into the search results, my pulse quickening with every new piece of information. One link led to a local business registry. My breath hitched as I read the entry. Mara Lindell, current resident of Brookhaven, Collins County, Brookhaven. The same town I was sitting in. She'd never left. My heart began to race as the pieces collided in my mind. All this time, the woman who destroyed my father, the name whispered in Iris's letter, had been living right here, maybe shopping at the same stores, walking the same streets, while my family fell apart. I stared at her name on the screen, the faint reflection of my own eyes staring back at me. For the first time, I felt something stronger than grief or confusion. It was determination, cold and sharp. If Mara Lindell had buried my father's truth, I was going to dig it. Built up. I didn't sleep that night. The name Mara Lindell looped through my mind like an echo I couldn't silence. I kept seeing her signature beside my father's on those old business documents, wondering how a woman who once stood beside him in every success could have been the one to tear everything apart. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I found her address online, an elegant townhouse on the other side of Brookhaven, and drove there before I could lose my nerve. The building looked like something out of another world. Tall glass windows, manicured hedges, and a brass plaque engraved with M. Lindell and Associates. She still ran a consulting firm, still living the life she'd built on what my father lost. For a moment, I just sat in the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel, unsure if I was ready to face her. Then I remembered my father's words. Find the truth before they find you. Inside, the receptionist led me to a modern office where Mara waited. She was in her late 50s. Elegant, confident, with silver blonde hair and eyes sharp enough to see through walls. When she looked up at me, a small, knowing smile crossed her lips. You must be Alara Collins, she said. Her voice was calm, steady. I was wondering when you'd show up. You knew I'd come? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I had a feeling, she said, gesturing toward a chair. Your father always said you had his persistence. The way she said his name made something twist inside me. You knew my father well, I said, sitting down. I did, she replied. He was a brilliant man. Too trusting, perhaps, but brilliant. I stared at her. He trusted you. A flicker of something guilt maybe passed through her eyes before she masked it with a faint smile. He trusted a lot of people, she said. And some of them didn't deserve it. You mean Iris? I asked. Mara's expression softened. Poor Iris. She got caught in something she never understood. She thought she could fix what your father discovered. But by then, it was already too late. What did he discover? I demanded. What was so terrible that it destroyed him? Mara leaned back in her chair, studying me. You really don't know, do you? She said quietly. Your father stumbled upon something buried deep in the company's finances documents that shouldn't have existed. Property transfers, fake accounts, shell corporations. He realized the business wasn't just failing, it was being drained from the inside. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Drained by who? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she looked out the window, her tone softer now. He tried to confront them. But people don't like being exposed, especially when they have something to lose. After that, everything turned against him. The partners withdrew, clients vanished, and rumors spread faster than truth. I could hear the bitterness under her calm tone. So he was ruined deliberately, I said. Mara nodded slowly. He didn't deserve what happened. But he was stubborn. He wouldn't stay quiet. He planned to reveal everything. And you stopped him? Her eyes snapped back to mine, sharp again. I didn't stop him, she said. I warned him. There's a difference. I leaned forward. Then who did? She sighed, folding her hands together. You're looking for monsters in other people's shadows, Alara. But sometimes the people we trust most are the ones holding the knife. Her words hung in the air between us. I thought of my mother, her evasive answers, her warnings not to dig too deep. My stomach tightened. Are you saying my mother was involved? Mara tilted her head, studying me. I'm saying your father's downfall wasn't the work of strangers. It came from within. He knew that in the end. The room suddenly felt colder. If you know who did this, tell me. She hesitated for the first time. You think you want the truth, she said softly. But it might destroy the image you have of your family, especially your mother. I met her gaze, my voice shaking but certain. I'd rather know an ugly truth than live with a beautiful lie. Mara stared at me for a long moment, then gave a small nod as if weighing whether I deserved to hear it. Slowly, she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a thin folder bound with a red string. The sound of the string snapping open echoed like a final warning. She pushed it across the table toward me. Then you should read this, she said, her voice calm but edged with something almost sorrowful. Everything you're looking for is in here. I hesitated, my fingers inches from the folder. What is it? I asked. Mara met my eyes, her expression unreadable. Proof, she said. And the name of the person who destroyed your father. My pulse thundered in my ears. Who? Her lips curved into a thin, knowing smile. It's someone you've known your whole life. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The folder sat in front of me, its red string lying loose like a severed vein. Mara watched silently as I gathered the courage to open it. Her eyes sharp but almost pitying. When I finally lifted the cover, the scent of old paper hit me, a mix of dust and secrets too long buried. Inside were documents, letters, and signed statements, each one like a shard of glass waiting to cut. The first few pages were business records, transfers, forged signatures, and falsified transactions that dated back more than a decade. My father's handwriting appeared here and there, notes scrawled in the margins. She's hiding something. Can't let this continue. His words were frantic but determined. The deeper I read, the more my stomach turned. There were bank accounts linked to names I recognized, family names. And then I saw it. A signature that made my blood run cold. Camille Archer, my mother's sister, my aunt. I blinked, reading it again, as if my eyes were lying to me. Camille had always been part of our family's story, my aunt, who lived a few towns away, charming and sophisticated, the one who visited with expensive gifts and hollow smiles. I remembered her laughter at family dinners, how my father would grow quiet whenever she spoke, how my mother's smile always seemed forced in her presence. It had never occurred to me that beneath all that polite affection was something rotten. She orchestrated everything, Mara said softly, watching my reaction. Your father trusted her with parts of the business when he shouldn't have. She wanted more control, money, power. When he refused to hand it over, she turned on him. Iris got caught in the crossfire. I felt nauseated, gripping the folder so tightly my knuckles turned white. And my mother? I whispered. Mara hesitated. She knew. Not everything. Maybe, but enough. Enough to keep quiet when she should have spoken. Her words hit harder than I expected. My breath caught, a bitter taste rising in my throat. My mother, who had told me to stop digging, who had warned me that truth could destroy, had been protecting her sister all along. I gathered the papers, my heart pounding as I stood. I need to hear it from her. Mara didn't stop me. Be careful, she said instead. Some people can live with lies because they've convinced themselves it's love. By the time I got home, the sky had turned dark and heavy, mirroring the storm in my chest. I found my mother sitting in the living room, knitting absent-mindedly, her eyes distant. When she saw the folder in my hands, her face drained of color. Where did you get that? She asked, her voice low, almost fearful. From Mara, I said. It's all here, every document, every lie. Camille forged the accounts, stole from Dad, and ruined everything he built. You knew didn't you? Her lips trembled. Alara, please. You knew. My voice cracked, raw and shaking. You let him die thinking he'd failed, while she walked free. How could you protect her? Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she covered her face with her hands, her shoulders trembling. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. She's my sister. I couldn't destroy her. Your father wanted to go public, but it would have torn our family apart. I thought if I kept it quiet, it would fade away. Fade away? I repeated, my throat tight. He lost everything, his name, his peace, and you just let it happen? She looked up, eyes red and hollow. I did what I thought was right. I wanted to protect you, to keep us intact. I stared at her, my chest aching. There's nothing intact about this family, I said softly. Not anymore. The silence between us stretched until it became unbearable. Then, in a trembling voice, she added something that made my blood freeze. Your father found out what Camille did. He confronted her. The night before he died. She stopped, struggling to breathe. He told me he couldn't live with the lies anymore. He was going to expose her. My pulse hammered in my ears. Are you saying? Her gaze met mine, filled with an anguish that made my stomach twist. That's why he died, Alara, she whispered. Your father didn't just pass away. He was silenced before he could destroy her. The room spun, the air too thick to breathe. My father's death, my family's lies, everything I thought I knew, it all collapsed around me, piece by piece. The house was eerily quiet after my mother's confession, the kind of silence that sits heavy, pressing down until breathing feels like a chore. I sat across from her, the folder still open between us. The proof of everything that had destroyed our family spread out in plain sight. The weight of it was unbearable, my father's downfall. The lies, the betrayal, all orchestrated by the woman my mother had called her sister. I broke the silence first. You said he was silenced. What did you mean? Her gaze dropped to her hands. Your father's death wasn't an accident, she said, her voice trembling. He was under tremendous pressure in those final weeks. The debts, the lawsuits, the whispers, they weren't real. They were forged, created to corner him until he broke. I could barely comprehend it. He didn't just collapse, I whispered. He was pushed. Tears slipped down her cheeks. He wanted to fight back. He told me he'd gathered evidence, that he was going to expose Camille and her partners. But the night before he died, he received a call. I don't know what was said, only that afterward, he seemed defeated. He told me he was leaving a letter for you, That someday you'd understand everything. The letter, the box, the hidden key. It all made sense now. My father hadn't just written to comfort me, he'd written to make sure the truth didn't die with him. I leaned back, my mind piecing together every fragment. So, the collapse of the company, the accusations, even the rumors, they were all part of her plan. My mother nodded weakly. Camille wanted control. She manipulated investors, transferred assets, and made it appear as though your father had embezzled funds. When he started to catch on, she panicked. I begged him to walk away, but he wouldn't. He believed truth mattered more than survival. A sharp ache formed behind my ribs. My father had died believing honesty would save him, and instead, it had cost him everything. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, my voice breaking. Why did you let me think he died in peace? Her face crumpled. Because I couldn't bear for you to see me as a coward, she said. I should have stood by him, but I stayed silent. I thought, protecting the family meant hiding its sins. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd spent years resenting my mother for her coldness, never realizing that underneath it was guilt. For a moment, I just stared at her, this woman, who had spent a lifetime balancing love and shame until she could no longer tell the difference. When I finally spoke, my voice was softer. You made mistakes. But so did he. He trusted the wrong people. Maybe we all did. She looked up, her eyes wet. Can you forgive me? I swallowed hard. Yes, I said. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. We owe him the truth. The world deserves to know what really happened. Her lips parted in surprise. You want to expose Camille? I do, I said firmly. He died trying to clear his name. I'm not going to let his story end as a lie. My mother hesitated, then nodded slowly. If you're truly ready, I'll help you. I've kept too many secrets. It's time to set them free. For the first time in years, something shifted between us, an understanding, fragile but real. The space that had once been filled with resentment now held a quiet unity. We sat together at the dining table, going through the documents, piecing the puzzle into a narrative that the world could no longer ignore. As the night deepened, exhaustion pulled at us, but for once, I felt light, like we were finally walking toward truth instead of running from it. I gathered the papers into a single folder, labeling it Collins Case Evidence. My mother watched me, her eyes filled with both fear and pride. What happens now? She asked softly. We tell the truth, I said. All of it. Just as I spoke the words, a sharp knock echoed through the house. We froze, exchanging a wary glance. Another knock followed, slow, deliberate. My mother stood, her face draining of color. Through the frosted glass of the front door, a familiar silhouette appeared. Poised, confident, unmistakable, Camille, my aunt. She was standing on our doorstep. The moment my mother opened the door, the air inside the house shifted, thickened, almost as if it could sense the danger that had arrived. Camille stood on the threshold, her posture poised, her expression smooth and composed, like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror before coming. She looked almost exactly as I remembered, polished, elegant, and cold beneath her charm. But now that I knew the truth, every inch of that elegance felt poisoned. Hello, sister, Camille said lightly, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. You look tired. Her gaze swept over me, lingering for a fraction too long. And Alara, my dear, you've grown into such a determined young woman. I've been hearing that you've been asking a lot of questions lately. My mother's voice trembled. Camille, why are you here? Camille smiled faintly, setting her purse on the table like she owned the room. Because I think it's time we stop letting the past haunt us. Don't you agree? I stood near the window, my arms crossed, my pulse pounding. The past doesn't haunt people who tell the truth, I said quietly. Only the ones who lie. Her eyes flicked to me, still calm but sharper now. You've been speaking to Mara, haven't you? And digging through things you don't understand. That woman's a liar, Alara. Always has been. I've read the documents, I said, refusing to look away. I know what you did. You framed my father, forged his signature, funneled the company's money into your own accounts. You destroyed everything he built. For the first time, the smile faltered. My mother sank into a chair, her hands trembling. Camille's gaze hardened. You don't know what you're talking about, she said coolly. Those records mean nothing without context. Then give me context, I snapped. Explain why his reputation was ruined, why my mother had to live in silence, and why my father died trying to expose you. The words struck her like a slap, and for a heartbeat, she looked shaken. Then her tone shifted softer, almost pleading. Alara, your father wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, risky investments, questionable decisions. I was just trying to protect the family's interests. Everything I did was for us. For us? I repeated, incredulous. You ruined his name for money. You let him die believing no one would ever know the truth. Camille's composure cracked. Do you have any idea what it was like watching him destroy everything our parents worked for? He was reckless. I stepped in because someone had to. He wouldn't listen to reason. And your mother. She stopped herself, glancing at my mother with a sneer of accusation. She knew what I was doing. She just didn't have the courage to stop me. Enough, my mother said suddenly, her voice shaking. You don't get to twist this anymore. You took everything from him and from us. I let you do it because I was too afraid to lose you, but I won't protect you anymore. Camille's expression hardened to stone. You think exposing me will bring him back? It'll destroy what's left of this family. Do you really want that on your conscience? I stepped closer, my heart pounding but my voice steady. What family? The one you broke for greed? The one you built on lies? My father deserved justice, and I'm going to make sure he gets it. I'm done protecting people who never protected us. Her jaw tightened. You're naive, she said softly. You think the truth will set you free. But it won't. It'll ruin you, Alara. You don't know how deep this goes. I met her gaze, unflinching. Maybe not. But I know enough. The silence stretched, thick with everything unsaid. Camille took a step toward me, her perfume sharp and artificial, masking the venom in her words. You're just like him, she whispered. Stubborn. Idealistic. And look where that got him. I'm not afraid of you, I said. Her smile returned then, small and cold. You should be. She reached for her purse, her voice dropping to a low, almost casual murmur. You'll regret destroying what's left of this family, Alara. Some truths don't just ruin lives, they end them. And with that, she turned and walked out, leaving the door wide open behind her. The night air swept in, cool and heavy, carrying with it the faintest echo of her warning. The days that followed Camille's visit were a blur of tension and resolve. My mother and I barely spoke at first. We didn't need to. We both knew there was no turning back now. The moment Camille walked out of that house, we became two women united by a single purpose to bring the truth to light, no matter the cost. We spent hours at the dining table, surrounded by stacks of papers, scanned files, and legal documents. I reached out to a lawyer, recommended by Mara, someone who had worked quietly on financial fraud cases before. When he reviewed the evidence, bank transfers, falsified signatures, email threads, he looked up at me with a mix of awe and concern. If this is real, he said, you're sitting on the kind of case that can destroy reputations. Are you sure you're ready for that? I didn't hesitate. I'm ready. My father deserves the truth. Word spread faster than I expected. Within a week, whispers began to ripple through town. People who had once turned their backs on my father's memory suddenly looked at me differently, curious, unsettled, perhaps even guilty. Old acquaintances came forward, people I hadn't heard from in years. One of my father's former employees reached out, saying he'd always suspected something was wrong with the numbers but had been too afraid to question Camille's authority. Another sent me an old voicemail from my father, his voice calm but strained, talking about someone inside trying to dismantle everything he built. Each new piece felt like a puzzle falling into place, painful but necessary. With every document, every witness statement, the image of Camille as the family's shining success story crumbled. The woman who had smiled at every charity gala, praised as a visionary and role model, was finally being seen for what she truly was, a fraud built on betrayal. The media picked up the story sooner than I anticipated. A local paper published a piece about the Collins scandal revisited, detailing the decades-old collapse of my father's business and hinting at new revelations of forgery and deceit. The article didn't name Camille directly, but anyone who knew our family could read between the lines. Family friends called my mother in disbelief, some out of concern, others out of gossip-fueled fascination. I heard her crying late at night, whispering apologies to my father's memory, her voice hoarse with guilt. I wanted to comfort her, but I also knew she needed to face the weight of her choices, the years of silence that allowed this truth to fester. For me, it was different. The anger that once burned like wildfire inside me had transformed into something steadier determination. For the first time since my father's death, I felt like I was doing something he would have been proud of. I spent one morning at the courthouse filing the official complaint with our lawyer, my mother by my side. It felt surreal, like signing my name to a new chapter of our family's history, one that wouldn't be written in shame. Afterward, I drove to the cemetery. The autumn wind was cool and gentle, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves. My father's gravestone stood beneath an old oak tree, simple and dignified. I knelt beside it, brushing away the leaves that had gathered at its base. "We're doing it, Dad," I whispered. "We're finally setting things right. I promise. Your name won't be the one buried anymore." For a moment, I thought I felt something. A warmth, a stillness, as if the earth itself was listening. I closed my eyes, imagining his voice again, calm and steady. That night, as I sat at my desk organizing the final batch of documents, my phone buzzed. I expected another message from the lawyer or one of the reporters, but the number was unknown. My heart skipped as I opened the text. "You don't know the full truth yet." The message glowed on the screen like a warning. My pulse quickened. For a second, I thought it might be Camille, lashing out in desperation, but something about the tone felt different, calmer, almost knowing. If there was still more to uncover, what could possibly be left? I thought I'd reached the end of this story, the betrayal, the confession, the justice. But that single message reminded me, in my family, nothing ever ended cleanly. The anonymous message wouldn't leave my mind. For 2 sleepless nights, I kept replaying those words, "You don't know the full truth yet." I told myself it was a scare tactic, maybe from Camille or someone desperate to intimidate me. But a part of me couldn't ignore it. Something about the phrasing felt deliberate. Like whoever sent it knew there was still something waiting to be uncovered. On the 3rd day, another text arrived. This time, it was an address and a code, Unit 23B, Brookhaven Storage. That was all. I didn't tell my mother. I couldn't. After everything we'd just gone through, I wasn't sure I was ready to drag her into another layer of secrets. So, the next morning, I drove to the address alone. The storage facility sat on the edge of town, tucked behind a line of warehouses. The sky was gray, heavy with the promise of rain. As I walked down the narrow row of metal doors, the numbers blurred past until I reached 23B. The padlock was old but unfastened, hanging loosely as if someone had already been disting. There. I hesitated, then lifted the door. The air inside was stale and cold. Boxes were stacked in uneven towers. Their labels faded. A thin layer of dust coated everything except one corner, where a small table stood. On it sat a tape recorder, a stack of cassette tapes, and a brown envelope with my name written in my father's familiar handwriting. My breath caught in my throat. My hands trembled as I pressed play on the recorder. There was a hiss, then his voice steady, calm, achingly familiar. "Alara," he said, "if you're hearing this, it means you've done what I hoped you would. You've searched for the truth. I always knew you'd find it, even when everyone else tried to bury it." Tears welled in my eyes. Hearing his voice after all these years felt like reopening an old wound. I clutched the edge of the table, listening as he continued. You've probably learned by now who betrayed me. Camille's greed was one piece of the story, but not the whole of it. There were others who helped her, people I loved, people I trusted. I frowned, leaning closer. What are you saying, Dad? I whispered to the empty room. I don't want you to hate your mother, his voice went on. She made choices she thought would protect you. When the company started to crumble, she signed documents she shouldn't have. She helped hide some of the missing funds because if she hadn't, everything, including our home, would have been taken. I begged her to come clean, but she couldn't bear the thought of you growing up with nothing, so she kept her silence. For that, I forgave her. I hope someday you can too. The recorder clicked off, leaving only the sound of my ragged breathing. My father's words settled over me like a cold blanket. My mother, who had stood by, who had cried beside me, who had sworn she only stayed silent to protect our family, had been part of it all. She hadn't just known about Camille's crimes. She had helped to cover them up. I sank to the floor, my mind spinning. It felt like the world was collapsing all over again, only this time, there was no one left to hold me up. The betrayal ran deeper than I'd ever imagined. My father's death, my aunt's lies, my mother's silence, they were all threads of the same web. When I finally went home, my mother was sitting by the window, staring at the darkening sky. I set the envelope and recorder on the table in front of her. She looked at them, then at me, her eyes filled with quiet resignation. You found it, she said softly. Is it true? I asked, my voice trembling. Her silence was enough. Then, after a long pause, she nodded. Yes, I did it. I helped move some of the money. Signed what Camille gave me. I thought it was temporary. That it would protect us. When I realized what she'd done, it was too late. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Her voice broke. Because I didn't want you to see me the way I see myself. Your father forgave me before he died. But I couldn't forgive myself. I turned away, tears burning in my eyes. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or simply walk away. I loved her, but I hated what she'd done. Forgiveness felt impossible, yet revenge suddenly seemed meaningless. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I reached into the envelope and pulled out one last folded piece of paper. My father's handwriting covered the front. For Alara, my final words. My fingers hovered over the seal, my pulse pounding in my ears. Part of me wanted to open it immediately. Another part wasn't ready for what it might say. I looked at my mother, who sat silently, eyes closed, as if bracing herself for whatever was coming. The rain began to fall outside, soft and steady. I held the letter to my chest, knowing it contained the last piece of the truth and maybe the final chance to heal what was left of us. The letter felt heavier than paper should. My hands shook as I sat at the kitchen table, the rain still whispering against the windows. My mother sat quietly across from me, her eyes distant, her fingers gripping her teacup like it was the only thing anchoring her. I took a deep breath and broke the seal. The paper inside was thin, the ink faded. But the moment I saw my father's handwriting, a warmth spread through my chest, fragile and aching. My dearest Alara, it began. If you're reading this, then I couldn't finish what I started. But I know you. I know you would keep searching until you found what I couldn't say aloud. You've always had a heart too strong for silence. I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. By now, you've learned more than I ever wanted you to. I'm sorry for the pain that truth carries. I never meant for it to weigh on you. The choices your mother made, the betrayal that tore us apart, none of it defines who we are. What defines us is how we move forward when the truth is finally in our hands. Tears blurred the words, but I kept reading, each sentence cutting deeper. If I could ask you for one thing, it would be this. Don't let anger be your inheritance. Don't spend your life chasing revenge. Live in truth, not in bitterness. Forgive what you can, and make peace with what you can't. You are the best of both of us, your mother's heart and my stubborn hope. Don't waste them on hate. I set the letter down, my chest rising and falling with quiet sobs. For so long, I'd been consumed by the need for justice, for answers, for someone to blame. But here, in his final words, my father wasn't asking for vengeance. He was asking for release. My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling as it rested on mine. He always believed you'd be the one to save us, she said softly. Even from ourselves. I really looked at her, the guilt carved into her face, the grief she'd carried for years. And I realized that exposing everything would only destroy what little remained. The truth didn't need to be shouted to be heard. Sometimes, it only needed to be acknowledged. Over the next few weeks, I made my decision. I wrote the full story, every secret, every lie, every revelation, but I didn't name anyone. I published it anonymously online, under the title, The Family That Fell Silent. I didn't write it for revenge or recognition. I wrote it for people like my father, those who'd been buried under someone else's deceit, and for families like mine, torn apart by pride and silence. The story spread quietly but steadily. Emails poured in from strangers who said they saw themselves in it, who thanked me for giving voice to the pain they never could. Each message felt like a small redemption, not just for my father, but for all of us. Meanwhile, my mother began to change in ways I hadn't expected. The guilt that had once kept her hollow seemed to lift, bit by bit. We started talking again, not about the past, but about simple things. Dinner recipes, books, the garden she'd neglected for years. Our bond wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was healing. One crisp morning, months later, I drove back to the lake house. The road was quiet, the air cool with the scent of pine and memory. The house still stood, weathered but strong. I walked down to the water's edge, where my father used to teach me how to skip stones. The surface of the lake shimmered in the morning light, calm and endless. I knelt by the water, pulled the last page of his letter from my coat pocket, and read the final line aloud. Some truths don't destroy families, Alara, they set them free. The wind carried the words across the lake, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. The silence that had haunted us was gone, replaced by something gentler, a quiet truth that would never again be hidden.